Welcome to the Unconventional Path, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Stories and Ideas podcast. I'm Bela and Mike.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike. Today we're joined by Chris Bursey. He is the founder of Direct Communication Solutions. This company is a provider of Internet of Things products and services. You might ask, what is Internet of Things? Well, it's a term that generally means the coordination of sensors that sit on devices or vehicles or structures that tell you things like temperature, location. They might record sound, the amount of vibrations, but it collects all sorts of data. And it takes this data and it transmits it to some other device that collects it and aggregates it and analyzes it sometimes, and then gives you an output. So it's a very sort of common term that's going on. And has been enabled by our internet technology, which enables communication very easily across various different devices. Sometimes they use Bluetooth, sometimes they use cellular networks, but they use all sorts of communication protocols to transfer this data back and forth. With the whole notion of being is understanding what's going on with the product in some cases, or collecting data to help you make better decisions.
And Bela, I love IoT. That's what we call Internet of Things, IoT, Internet of Things. And I like to give an example when I'm teaching my students about IoT that I think makes it kind of clear. And this is from a consumer standpoint. So what I use IoT for and why I love IoT. So in the house I used to have in New York, I had a number of IoT devices. I was kind of an early adopter. And now a lot of us will call it smart home technology. So on the consumer side, if you see stuff that says, oh, smart home technology, a lot of that is based on this IoT, Internet of Things kind of protocol and concept. And what Chris is talking about is on the industrial scale. We'll talk about that in a minute. But just to kind of get a sense, I had these IoT devices that essentially talk to each other, and they work together to try to make my life simpler and even safer. So for example, my heating and cooling system was connected to an IoT thermostat. So I could control that thermostat not only from inside the house, but from when I was away. And you know, I travel a lot, okay? So I could tell, well, before Corona, but I traveled a lot and will travel a lot again, I think. But I could tell what the temperature was in my house. I could turn the heat up or down if I needed to from away. And you would think, oh, why would you need that? But I'll get to that, okay? So that by itself is just kind of a gimmick, okay? I also had 4 smoke and fire and carbon monoxide alarms in my house. One on each floor, basement, first floor, second floor, and one in the garage. And those were also, I got IoT versions of this that were connected. And you might think, well, why do you need that? But if I was gone, so I lived in the middle of a forest, right? And I'm not afraid of a lot of things in this world, but one of the things that I was kind of afraid of was a forest fire at some point, right? Or that something in my house catches fire and then there's a forest fire and I burn down the entire neighborhood, right? So for some reason I had this irrational fear, but having these connected smoke alarms, if the smoke alarm went off, even if I wasn't home, I got an alert immediately on my phone, okay? And they were connected. So that the smoke alarm went off, right? It would shut down the heating and cooling so it wouldn't have forced air, so it wouldn't blow the smoke and the flames all over the place. So now all of a sudden you start to see there's a safety piece here, okay? I had water sensors on the floor of my garage. I lived near a river, and in my basement in case there was water that came in and it could tell me immediately. I had a security camera that I could use when I was gone just to see what was going on. So if the smoke alarm went off, I also had lights that were connected, and my front door lock was all connected. And so if the smoke alarm went off, okay, first I could tell if it was one smoke alarm or all 4 smoke alarms, or I could see if they were, how that worked. And then I could turn the light on if it was at night, and I could see if there was actually smoke in the house, okay? Because I could turn the lights on and turn the camera on, so it was pretty cool. It could also flash the lights, because like when my parents were still traveling and around, and they would come, you know, they don't hear so well, they don't see so well, right? When you get old, so it could actually flash the lights in addition to play the sound on the smoke alarm to make sure people get out. If something went off, my smoke alarm went off, and it looked like a false alarm, right? Only one went off. I didn't see any smoke. There was nothing else that was out of sorts. I could text one of my neighbors to say, hey, can you go check on it? And I had a lock on my front door that I could control from my phone and they could get in. Or if there was a fire, I could unlock the door so that the fire department get in so they didn't have to bash the door in, right? So all this stuff was kind of connected. And it made sure that when I wasn't home, that all my systems were working together to keep me informed of what was going on and to keep my property safe and to keep people safe if I was there, right? These were all things that could really go. Now, I didn't do this, but I could have also shared this information with my home insurance company, and they would give me a discount on the premiums for using this stuff. Okay? So there's insurance companies that will do that. If you use one of these smart fire smoke alarms, right, that's connected to your HVAC or your heating and cooling system, they'll give you a discount. So some of this pays for itself because they see that when you have this, you have less claims, right? So you can jump on things and you find things early. So this is an example on the consumer side of the Internet of Things, right? That you have these different devices. They each have a sensor, just like you said in the opening, Bela, and these sensors would share data and they would talk to each other and do things automatically without me having to get involved. And I could also see and monitor it and make decisions about, do I need to call a neighbor? Do I need to come home? Right? What do I need to do in order to kind of make sure that things are under control? We're going to talk, I think, today more about industrial kind of versions of this where the sensors are on trucks or in factories or on bridges or what have you, and they're all talking to each other. But it's the same basic idea. Yeah?
Good explanation, Mike.
Well, that's my lecture for the day. Sorry. Let's jump into the interview because it's much more interesting than what I have to say.
Very good. Let's do that. Hello, folks. Today, our guest is Chris Bursey. He is the founder of Direct Communication Solutions. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you, Bella. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. So tell us, what does Direct Communication Solutions do?
So, great question. We're a systems integrator for IoT or Internet of Things type solutions. So, we really focus on a couple of areas: fleet for the telematics space, and then sensors for, any facility, machine, high value asset that you want to be able to track or monitor. And, at the end of the day, we harvest the big data from machines and assets and give it to our customers in a usable form that lets them, efficiently and effectively run their business.
Yeah. Yeah. So strip that down a little bit. Kind of, if
Sure.
you were explaining that to your grandmother, how would you explain that to her?
Let's just go get a cup of coffee, Grandma. No, it's when you look at the IoT space in general, it's pretty broad industry, right? It means a lot of different things to different people. So when you really boil it down, we focus on collecting data from assets, a device, equipment, whatever you want to monitor. And it could be in the fleet space, the refrigeration, cold chain cargo, shipping, any vertical within that market. And then we take that big data, pull it from the device, and then give it back to the end users.
Okay.
And they can use that to, make decisions on running their business.
So, for example, if I had a fleet of 20 trucks that were, delivering things to various different customers, you can help me keep track of them, where they are, what they're doing. Are they moving? Walk me through that as an example.
So, we can give you everything from, dots on the map, where your vehicle, your asset is, all the way through the entire ecosystem. So we can do dots on the map, basic tracking, geofences. We can do driver behavior, vehicle diagnostics, add-ons or, tire pressure monitoring systems, ultrasonic fuel levels, ELD, dash cams. So there's a whole different set of verticals within that vertical. And then, we have a core foundation of hardware products, and then we just tailor the software side to the customer's needs and give them what they want.
I see. So is there, let's just stick with the truck fleet as an example. Just trying to help our listeners sort of understand this a little better. Is there some hardware that you guys then install on the truck fleets, or do the cars come out of the trucks come out of the factory ready to go?
Now, pretty much on the fleet side, anything for telematics, it's all aftermarket, right? So it's when you look at an IoT solution as a whole, there are three critical components to every IoT solution. There's the hardware component that pulls the data from the asset or device or vehicle. There's the cloud-based platform aspect, which then parses that data out and turns it into usable data. And then there's a cellular connectivity component for the airtime. So every IoT solution, regardless of what vertical or what it's doing, really at the end of the day has those three critical components to it.
Very nice. So, and you said you were a systems integrator, meaning you work with various other hardware and software suppliers, and you put the whole package together for the customer?
Yes. So, one of the things that makes us unique in the market is, we're very hands-on and we engage with our customers, right? And, I live by a very simple philosophy in business, especially in our business. It's listen to the customer and understand what they need to run their business more efficiently, and then also listen to them on what they want. And if we can give them what they need and then layer on and add on to what they want, it's a win-win for them, and they have a solution then that is really tailored to their business.
Yes.
And so
now, is there a recurring revenue piece to this business model you guys have?
there is. Yeah, there is.
And I once read a book that said recurring revenue is a good thing if you're in business. So talk us through that a little bit.
Recurring revenue is really, where the industry is going, right? It's providing a service on a monthly basis almost, if you will. So, there are still those three components, but, the industry and the market is really moving towards combining all three and saying, here's everything you need, and you pay one price per month for it, and you don't have to, go out and source stuff yourself.
Right.
So, it's a very fragmented market, to be honest with you. There's a lot of different devices, different things, different, requirements companies and customers have. And we really pride ourselves and specialize in, being able to go out and get the right piece of hardware for them, integrate it into the software that does what they need, and provide that connectivity and provide the, the fully bundled package solution.
Yeah. So when you're selling this to, doing a potential sales call to a customer, do they sometimes push back about sort of the subscription fee? Do they tend to, is that a positive from their perspective, or is it sort of a, they're thinking of their internet and cable TV provider, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, that's a real pain in my butt. So
yeah, great question. And the big difference, in my opinion, is, the ROI that you can show those customers by adopting these IoT solutions and, integrating them into your business analytics and decision making far outweighs the, the monthly cost or whatever, because you're able to really take action on any events or anything that your machine or asset's telling you.
Yeah.
And the ROI is definitely there, and that's really, the big selling point is being able to show people that ROI.
Yeah. Yeah. And is there also an upfront capital cost that customers deal with, or is it all rolled into the monthly subscription fee?
There's multiple options. Some people do want to have that upfront CapEx, expenditure, and have a lower monthly recurring charge. Others just, send me everything and I'll pay, one monthly fee for it. And, we really try to accommodate everybody.
Yeah. Just like my cell phone, right? I can buy the phone outright, or I can pay an extra $25 a month for the next 2.5 years.
Yeah, it's same model. Yeah, it's really, the industry's really going that way just because it's easier, and the technology and the the innovations moving so fast that we can continually replace the hardware and keep upgrading people, but keep them on the same software platform.
Yeah. So as a small business owner, when you're selling these products with these monthly subscriptions, sometimes that impacts your cash flow because you have to make the investment in the hardware, right? So let's say one of your customers says, no, I don't want to do a CapEx up front. I just want to roll it into my monthly fee. But then that gives you that CapEx expense up front. So how do you sort of manage that cash flow challenge in your business?
We do it case by case right now, to be honest with you. A lot of people, the first and foremost, a lot of the costs have come down to the point where it's palatable to be able to offer an OpEx model. But it is a constraint on cash flow as a small business, right? So we have to manage that, and we really try to, put the right product into those customers and be very, very aware of how many we're taking on at one time, right? Because after a certain point with the monthly recurring, it balances itself out.
Sure. Yeah. Once you get big enough, the monthly recurring is fabulous. Yeah.
Once that ball of cash is big enough, it's it's easier to do.
Now, I imagine it probably depends on where you are geographically and stuff, and the appetite for banks doing business loans. But if you have a signed contract with a pretty good size a customer, and you can probably leverage some of that to get a loan to help you pay for the capital goods up front.
No, and that's true, and that we're looking at those options right now as well, because we see a lot of opportunity moving forward in this space for people to if you look at IoT in general, it's still in its infancy stage, right? I mean, where it's going to be in the next 5, 7, 10 years, I can't wait to see some of the stuff that people create and come up with. It's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. So how long ago did you start Digital Communication Solutions?
We started Direct Communication Solutions 2006, I think 2006. Started out as an embedded module distributor selling the actual core radio component that goes into a lot of these IoT solutions. Moved up from there, started selling finished products for GPS tracking. Did very well there, and then probably 2 years ago we made the decision to pivot again and really transform ourselves into a full service SaaS company.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chris, what were you doing before you founded the company?
So a little bit about me. So I was in the military for 8 years. I was in the U.S. Navy. Got out of the Navy. I was a 911 dispatcher for the police department here for 5 years while I went to school and got my degree. And then I got into the IoT space in the late 90s. Started out with Novatel Wireless, which is now in Seago. Worked at Kyocera, Motorola, and then did the corporate thing and decided I wanted to branch out on my own and give it a shot. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah, yeah. So is there like entrepreneurship in your family, your parents, or are you sort of the lone wolf here on blazing on your own?
Yeah, it's I'm fortunate. I think I had the chance to kind of blaze my own path and learn, and I learned a lot of what I learned for business today I learned in the military, for example. And the biggest thing is just being able to deal with people, different kinds of people, different cultures, different personalities, and then more importantly that attention to detail. And that's one of my biggest things around here in my company is the details will destroy you. If you're not paying attention and you're not watching all the details and checking all the boxes, that's where the problems start, and they can most of the time be avoided by just paying attention to the details.
Yeah. One of the things I'm always interested in learning a little more about is particularly people who worked in, corporate America, worked for another company for a period of time and then blaze off on their own. What was there like an epiphany? I mean, were you in the shower one morning and said, "This is it. I'm leaving the company. I'm going to start my own business," or was it more of an evolution? Talk to us a little bit about that decision-making process, and the steps along the way.
I don't want to offend anybody on the corporate side because I may have to deal with them in the future. But, honestly, it was the freedom and, being able to control my own destiny, right? And being able to, really go out and do things that you can't do on the corporate side because of all the paperwork and the red tape and the bureaucracy, right? So, we really pride ourselves on being flexible, and being able to pivot and, go where the market's going. And we're not constrained with, 10 layers of bureaucracy trying to get something done.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. And did you have a co-founder or did you start the business yourself?
Yep. Out of my spare bedroom.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Yeah, the best way. And how was that? How was the first 12 months?
First 12 months was tough. The first 5-6 years was tough getting, making sure, bills were paid, employees were paid, everybody, the business is moving forward. And, it was worth it because now, the company's growing. It's, it's got a great future in front of it and we're in a great space and, nothing but blue skies for us right now, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, you guys do a fair amount of stuff using cellular networks, right? I mean, that's part of the big communication backbone that you guys draw upon for these mobile assets. With 5G coming out, how is that going to change it? And are they like sunsetting some of the older generations? And how does that impact you?
Yeah. So the technology transition is happening as we speak. So, the big carriers are going to shut off their 2G, 3G networks here pretty soon. I think one is in February next year and one is at the end of next year. It's a great opportunity, but it's also a challenge because when you look at it, everything that's been sold for the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, that's 2G, 3G, that's still out in the market, reporting in, doing its job, all has to be replaced, right? So that's where it gets tricky. There's a lot of supply chain issues going on in our industry right now with, shortages and long lead times, but it's good and it's bad, but it's a great opportunity and it's really going to bring everybody up to speed. And I think, by the cellular carriers moving to the 5G technology, it's really going to, boost the IoT space with the, the lower bandwidth type solutions.
Yeah.
Right. So they're going to be able to support all those handsets and smartphones and everything on the, the 5G super fast side, but it frees up a lot of, spectrum and, opportunity for us in the IoT space with the lower, 1 megabyte, 5 megabyte type offerings.
Oh, I see. So you can use that spectrum for other applications then. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah. So what we're doing now, so 4G is really the kind of the main foundation for IoT today. When you look at IoT, a lot of it's small data plans, just 1 meg a month, 5 meg a month, 10 meg a month. When you look at the handsets that are all supporting 5G now, they're talking download a movie in 30 seconds or 6 seconds, whatever they're doing. So yeah, it'll really free that up because on the 2G, 3G side, the handsets and the devices were all running on the same spectrum. So I think it's a good thing, and it's going to really help promote the industry.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you think this will change, or will it, the whole Internet of Things and the 5G and the various different applications have, most of these applications seems to me have been sort of on a commercial side, right? Trucking fleets, other assets they're tracking, supply chain, et cetera, management. Do you think some of these things will start migrating more into the kind of consumer end of things, applications that you and I might use on a daily basis?
I absolutely do. And I think in the short-term future, IoT is going to be that bridge that kind of ties everything together for everybody, to the point where, hypothetically, you could look at your smartphone at the grocery store and, be able to tell when that milk was transferred from the manufacturer to the distributor, what's temperature that, you can go on and, it's all valuable data. It's just how do you harvest it and turn it into usable data.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the whole data analytics piece is a big challenge, right? We collect more data now with just infinite amounts. It's unbelievable. And figuring out what to do with it and
Right.
how to make it productive is a challenge for sure.
Yeah, there's there's still a lot of cool solutions and devices and such that are being, developed and produced today. But I really do think there's going to be a full-on transition where everybody will have access to that data down the road.
Yeah.
But they're going to pay for it. Somebody's going to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you said that you founded this business yourself, and are you still running it by yourself? Are you basically the boss, as they say?
You could say that. Yes, I'm here every day, and it's a never-ending thing. But and when you really look at our business, though, we have to work with not only customers in the U.S., but we have suppliers and vendors and partners in China, Taiwan, Lithuania, Israel, all over the place, right? So it's definitely not a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
By any means.
Yeah. So how do you find, having a successful company that's been around for a while, you guys have been around for a while, that was, founded by one individual, and that individual is still running the business, 10 years later, 10 plus years later. What do you see as the challenges in sort of a founder-led business?
Honestly, I think it's just being able to be engaged on a daily basis and, really understand what's going on within the business from all aspects. We have, if you look at our business, I've got business units, I've got finance, operations, marketing, engineering, SaaS support, sales. We've got multiple businesses and within the business units, if you will. And, I spend a lot of time walking around talking to people, looking at the inventory, looking at the, the reports. And, I would say that's probably the biggest thing any small business owner should do is pay attention, because if you don't, the details will destroy you.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many employees do you have now, Chris?
Today we have about 43, I think.
Oh, it's a good sized business then.
Yeah. We've got people, we're headquartered in San Diego, which is where I am, which is the majority of the business for the, the infrastructure side. And then we've got salespeople across the country, and we've got some consultants that are helping us with stuff around the country.
So how have you found the challenges of having remote employees?
It's funny because before I was always of the mindset, you got to be in the office to, have that interaction, know what's going on. I think COVID really changed the way everybody's going to do business now. And, it's shown me that people don't have to be in the office. If they're committed and, they're doing their job, they can do it pretty much anywhere. And, honestly, if we didn't have a big operations logistics, function going on in our business, we probably would, we'd probably have a very small office.
Yeah.
Right. Because, people are just as efficient working remote as they are in the office. And, furthermore, you can really tell after a while who's contributing and who's not. Right.
Well, you can tell that whether they're in the office or not.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Right.
But I do. I really think COVID's changed the way everything's going to go forward. Even face-to-face business meetings. I think, these are, Skype and, video calls are going to be the norm. Yeah.
Do you guys use any special set of tools for either communications or project management, things like Slack or other, Microsoft groups, et cetera? Do you guys use some of those tools?
Yeah, we use Slack for the engineering and operations and internal communication. And then all the other basic software tools that are out there.
Yeah.
On the video side, we use Teams, but we also accommodate whatever customers have, vendors use.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. So, one of the questions, our listeners are predominantly entrepreneurs, folks who are either starting businesses or have started businesses or thinking about starting a business. And one of the questions that I get a lot, and this is also when I was a professor before I retired, teaching entrepreneurship, is students will ask, or young folks will ask, gee, I'm about ready to graduate. Should I start my business now, or should I go work for a larger company, or gain some experience and then start my business? And your path, you went in the military, right? So you were in the military for 8 years, and then when you got out of there, you used some of that to help you get an education, additional education and stuff. So what are your thoughts about, start it now, or should I wait and go work for a number of years in the workforce and then start my business?
I mean, I would, I think the standard answer is depends, but I think at the end of the day, if you're an entrepreneur, it's in your blood, and you don't have to do it now. Go get some experience, go, understand what you're going to get into, but it's the best thing in the world. And, if you have it in you, go do it. Mm-hmm. Right? Because, you can make it work. It's just how much work you want to put into it.
Yeah.
Right. And, I always say, failure to me is not an option, and it's not an option for me because I have 4 kids.
Yeah.
So, my job is not only to take care of this business and the employees, but it's also to take care of my family.
Sure.
And, it's funny though, because my wife has a normal job. Right. And then, she's always, why are you on the phone at, 10 o'clock at night or weekend? I'm like, my day, you have to accept that piece of it. But, the reward, if you work hard and want it, is, it's one of the best feelings in the world.
Yeah. 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 I think you're right on that. It sort of depends, part of the advantage of going to work for someone is you gain experience and you make mistakes on their nickel, not your own. Right. And we're all going to learn from our mistakes and make mistakes. But the flip side of that is probably from a financial perspective, unless you're really burdened with student loans, you're used to living a pretty meager lifestyle as a student. So starting a business, you don't need a lot of cash. But, if you got 4 kids and a house and a mortgage, all of a sudden walking away from that corporate job it feels a little more daunting, and starting your own business.
Oh, no, it's scary. We joke around here and say people have the 115 disease in the corporate world, meaning they get a paycheck on the 1st and the 15th. And, we don't. We have to, there's no magical checks that pop out of the air, right? It's all earned, and, you can do whatever you want. I mean, I think this is, one of the best times in our, in the technology space that we're in right now. And, if you're creative and you're willing to work hard and put in the time and, make those sacrifices, it's on you, right? You control your destiny. And that's one of the things that I really love about what I do is, we're still small enough that we can go out and be creative, and we can get things done, faster than other people.
Yeah. 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 So, let me ask you one last question here. Do you have a 1 or 2 or maybe 3 kind of words of wisdom or advice or lessons learned that you'd like to share with the audience?
One of my favorites that I like using around here is you got to keep on keeping on, right? I mean, any decision is better than no decision, because at least you can pivot and learn and, maybe get to the right decision, yeah. Right? But don't get, paralyzed with fear about things. And sometimes you just got to roll the dice, right?
Yeah.
And, follow your gut, follow your instincts. And, if you truly are meant to be an entrepreneur, you have those traits.
Yeah.
Right. And listen to your mind, but also listen to your gut feelings.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of my first job out of grad school was working for General Electric Research. And I can remember my boss always used to say, Bela, just do something. Even if it is wrong, just do something.
Yeah.
Right? And that's sort of your point, right? Action is important.
No action is not action.
That's right.
And, I think that's where, you know, I play, that's probably my biggest strength is, I think I can look at things objectively and with common sense and say, well, yeah, let's roll the dice. What's it going to cost? What's the risk? And then more importantly, what's the reward?
Yeah.
And, go chase that shiny object because, you got to chase them all and you'll catch one or two.
Yeah. So I just thought of another question I wanted to ask you. So you have 40 employees. Do you have any words of advice for handling challenging employees?
It's tough right now with, we're in California, so, you can't just replace people, especially with COVID. But I also believe if they're a challenging employee, I've failed somewhere or their manager has failed somewhere in training them, mentoring them, giving them the chance to correct those actions. But, when it comes to terminating people, I'm a big believer in if you're getting terminated, you're getting terminated. It should not be a shock to you,
right?
Especially if you've been given all the opportunity and chances to correct, the behavior or your ethics, your work ethic.
Yeah, very good. That's
So,
good, solid advice. Well, hey, Chris, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I also will say this real quick: be slow to hire and quick to fire.
Yes.
Right. Because if somebody's not contributing or pulling their weight, you have to identify that, and you have to do it not just for the company and the business, but for the other employees that are
right.
watching that behavior and then having to pick up the slack for somebody.
That's right. So, everybody in a small company knows who's pulling their own weight, who's not. And, and they're all watching how the boss is handling that because you send a very direct message by the way you deal with that.
Yeah.
I think that's real important. Well, those are great parting words, Chris. Thank you very much for being on the show. You've been a wonderful guest.
Thanks.
I really do appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Bela, that was a fascinating interview. What struck you most about your conversation with Chris?
So I think a couple things jumped out at me. One is that with this Internet of Things, we're collecting all sorts of data. And we're collecting data all over the place. Like even in your example earlier where you're talking about your house, if you wanted to, you could record all of that data. You could measure the temperature in your house. You could do all sorts of things. Well, take it a little one step further. For example, I put my venture capital hat back on. We have made an investment in a company that fundamentally does Internet of Things data collection for trucking fleets. So not only can they tell where the trucks are, but they can tell how fast it's being driven, how the driver's performing. In other words, is the driver accelerating slowly and touching and decelerating slowly, or is it more like a 16-year-old driver where they stamp on the gas and then they stomp on the brakes, which of course impacts the maintenance of the truck. They can also tell things like monitoring the temperature of the truck, etc., of the engine and the engine oil and the transmission oil. And they've gotten to the point where they can not predict failures, but say, hey, you know what? This truck, you might want to have them pull into a service station and have the guys check the oil filter because the oil pressure is going up or down or whatever, right? It's getting out of spec far before the sort of lights turn on for the driver. And actually this information that's being collected on the truck is being transmitted to a central facility where people monitor it, and they'll call up the driver and say, hey, you know what? We made an appointment for you to go into this service facility while you're on the road to go get the truck checked out. Because you can imagine when trucks are late that are shipping goods, that's a big penalty for the trucking company. So the point is they're collecting all sorts of data. The challenging part is what to do with this data, and that continues in all sorts of things. But the Internet of Things has enabled us to start collecting all this data. We quite haven't figured out what to do with it all, but we're collecting a lot of it. So it's both a big challenge and a big opportunity, and I think we're actually going to see a lot of companies kind of prop up or come up that are analyzing this data and sort of doing data mining and sort of understanding how to use it. But sort of at his business level, I think what really struck me was this sort of subscription model that he has for his business. We haven't had a lot of guests who have had subscription models. And I think that subscription models are really interesting. For the company, for his business, of course, the challenge there is sort of higher upfront capital costs, because in a subscription model, you, the company, are paying for any capital. So the subscription model is the same for your typical cell phone plan that you have, right? You get the cell phone not for free, but you pay 20 or 25 or 30 bucks a month. That's tacked onto your bill. But you don't have to spend the $800 or $900 up front. But someone's spending that $800 or $900 up front, right? And so he has higher upfront capital cost. So as a young startup business, subscription models are challenging because you have to manage your cash flow. And we have this problem with this company I was talking about, that we deal with fleets, trucking fleets, where we're installing, $800 worth of equipment into each truck, but we're not charging the company for that. It's built into the monthly subscription fee, but our capital costs in this business are high. So we have financing that does that. But the good thing about a subscription model from the company's perspective is once you hit sort of this certain critical number of customers, the cash flow is great because every month you're just getting this big influx of cash. So once you get over that threshold, so the early years are really challenging. The beginning can be very challenging and difficult, and you'll probably have to figure out some sort of financing. But once you get past a certain number of customers, sort of the subscription model is wonderful. And from the customer's perspective, it's great because there's no upfront capital cost. You get a monthly bill. It's predictable, right? So as a customer, you know what your bill's going to be every month. And it works really great. And the supplier takes all the capital risk. So I think it's something that's becoming more and more popular, these subscription service models. We're seeing them crop up in various different places. But I think it's sort of going to grow. And I think it's a sector of the economy that's going to continue to grow.
Yeah, anything with hardware and software bundled together, Bela, this is always a really interesting contracting tool that entrepreneurs can use. And I was talking to some of my students about this actually just 2 weeks ago. And creative contracting can be a really important tool for entrepreneurs that are just starting out, because you want to conserve that capital for the things that you really need, usually customer acquisition costs and things like this. So as it turns out, when there's some sort of hardware purchase, right, some sort of asset purchase that needs to be made, and especially if there's a service associated with it, it's worth trying to negotiate smaller upfront costs and larger monthly payments, okay, if that allows you to conserve your cash, okay? And maybe it's, renegotiable after 1 year or 2 years or something like that, but that's really a nice way to, maybe you're paying a little more for that luxury, but you might not be able to go get credit essentially, right, from a traditional lender, but you may have a vendor that would kind of give you that credit in the sense of, oh, well, we'll give you the hardware that you need here, the equipment you need for free, as long as you sign up for this, this monthly fee, right? That's an annual package. You have to be careful and do the math, but it can be a really nice way to conserve capital for entrepreneurs. You got to compare apples to apples, and you got to look at the net costs and how much you would be able to borrow that money for if you wanted to borrow it. But it can be a really nice way to conserve capital at the beginning of the startup phase.
It's leasing equipment versus buying equipment, right? That model's been around for many, many years, mm-hmm. Right? It's sort of the same idea.
Yep.
And Xerox and IBM
yep.
Made a lot of money in the old days leasing equipment, right? Right.
Yep. And it was a win-win, right? I mean, I think there's some people that made bad decisions and signed bad contracts, and you have to make sure you've got a good accountant to help you with this and a good lawyer. But it can really be a win-win. It's a win because the customer, the entrepreneur is getting access to something that they need and doing it in a way that's more affordable for them and isn't going to risk the cash flow of their business, right? Because I think, as you said in the interview, as Chris was talking about, it's this idea of you got to make payroll and you got to pay your rent, right? And if you've got more cash to do that, and you're paying this essentially in installments, right? In monthly installments, it can be a good way if you're smart about it. And right now borrowing costs are low, right? Interest rates are low, so it shouldn't be a huge expense. You got to watch out about the rates, because if they go up with the interest rates, and if there's a big spike, you could be left with something unpredictable. So you do have to be careful and talk to your lawyer and your accountant. But it can be a nice way, and these things are often negotiable, and people don't always realize that.
They can be good business models on both sides of the equation. And I think we often do not explore them as much as we should from a business perspective. And I think if you're a business owner who's selling equipment, I think giving your customer the option of either buying it or, in essence, a subscription model is a good thing, because different customers, I can remember periods of time of working at a business where we had lots of cash and we wanted to buy capital stuff because we wanted to get rid of the cash and reduce our profits for that year, because we knew we were going to need that equipment in the future. So why don't we buy it this year so it reduces our tax burden and our profits? And then there's other times when cash is really tight and this notion of being able to do a monthly payment is much more attractive. So listening to your customer and what the customer wants and needs, not just from a product perspective, but helping them figure out how to pay for it that makes sense for them, I think is something we often overlook as entrepreneurs. We set our price and we say that's what it is, and we're sort of rigid about it. But having different sort of purchasing plans, ways that people can acquire your products, I think is really an element that we often overlook.
Yeah, and it's so many times, this is the difference between B2B, business to business sales, and B2C, business to consumer sales. So, when you're selling B2B and your clients are other businesses, I mean, it's not like, you can't apply the same model that works at Walmart, where you're just assuming that you've got millions of customers and you're giving them all the same deal, an identical deal, because you don't have the time or the ability to customize things for each of your 17 million customers every day, right? But in B2B, you have typically a smaller number of customers, and they're more diverse. No two customers are the same in the B2B space. One of my friends has told me again and again, who works in this area, right, that no two customers are the same. So no two offers are usually going to look the same. Whereas, right, a tube of Colgate toothpaste is going to be the same price, right, for the first customer of the day and the last customer of the day. Okay, but in the B2B space, you might want to design different ways to buy that or to pay for it, pay per use, whatever. So there's room for creativity there, and great companies that are great B2B companies have figured that out. But a lot of times entrepreneurs that are selling B2B, they haven't quite gotten to that yet. And they don't realize that, or a big company that's used to dealing with large companies, they're starting to sell to startups. They don't realize that startups have different needs. Yeah. So yeah, really interesting thing. The other thing that really struck me about the conversation with Chris was that he talked about upgradability. And when you've got a subscription model, you can if you're careful about it, you can see that, every X number of years, they'll refresh the equipment, right? So if you were buying it, you would have to buy new equipment. But in a lot of cases, they'll either at a heavy discount, right? They'll buy back your old and give you your new, or as part of the contract, they'll upgrade. And so in something like technology, where there's this kind of degradation over time of the technology, you can essentially get a fresh view. It's like the phone when they always upgrade your phone. If you think about it, the consumer side, same thing on the B2B side. A new phone every 2 years. Well, yeah, we'll give you new equipment every 2 years if you pay this rate. And that's got value to some entrepreneurs as well, they don't want to worry about, are they up with the latest technology? The service provider takes care of it. So I think that's a neat.
I was just going to say one thing, Mike. That upgrade is not only often good for the customer, but it's also good for the supplier, because they're not having to support all these different versions of the products out there. So oftentimes they're motivated as well to sort of get rid of the old generation of stuff that's out in the field and replace it with the newer generation of stuff, because it cuts down on their service cost, their sort of ability and need to support various different versions of hardware and software that's installed out in the field. So there's pluses on both sides of that we should think about. And I think one of the things about having Chris on the show is that it's highlighted this notion of there's a lot of things that are beneficial to both the customer and the supplier, and making them work in harmony is an important thing that you can do.
Yeah. And sometimes as the customer, you just have to ask, right? Sometimes if you ask, hey, Well, I think my stuff's getting old, and I would think there might be some benefit for you for getting me up to the next version. What would that cost? Right? And they might say, geez, you're right. Right? You're right. Let's do this, and let's give you a good deal on it and get it done. Right? And that happens.
Absolutely.
I've seen that happen. Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about Chris himself, because that was a really interesting story with kind of his military background, how he came to be an entrepreneur. What was your sense of the really interesting takeaways from this part of the conversation?
So I thought it was interesting. He talks about his military career, and sort of, he really learned, and he talked about this a fair amount, sort of attention to detail, and that one of the things that's really important as a business owner is attention to detail, and the way I look at that is someone in the business needs to pay attention to the details. So if that's not in your makeup, then you better hire somebody who does that. And if it's in your makeup, then great, then you can pay attention to details. But he really talked about that, like the details will destroy you. And understanding those things, I think, is really important. I think the other interesting thing was he wanted freedom, right? He wanted to control his own destiny. And he wanted to go where the market is going. He wanted to react to it quickly. And this is what traditionally small entrepreneurial businesses are really good at. This is where you can beat the larger companies every day, because their decision-making process, the decision-making process in the larger company, is months, if not years long. And as a small company, you can react to what's going on in the marketplace. And I think that's the key here, the key advantage that small entrepreneurial businesses have every day. And I think Chris was really focused in on that, and he understood that, and he understood that that was an advantage to sort of his business.
Totally. All right. I thought that was just a really cool, his whole train of thought on that was really fantastic. Let's talk about kind of the time frame that he looked at too. And he really talked about kind of the first few weeks you asked him, which was a great question, in the first 5 years. Is that something typical that you saw in the VC days? Is that something that all entrepreneurs should expect? What's the best way to deal with it? What were your thoughts on kind of that? My other question. Well, why do people like Chris make it and other people don't?
Yeah, well, the last part of the second half of your question is the tough one. I'm not sure I have an answer for that, or even some good relative thoughts. But I think starting something new, I think, is always a challenge, right? It's always tough, or often tough. And starting a new business or a new endeavor is no different, right? And when you're starting something, I like to compare and contrast things, right? So there's starting a new enterprise, starting a new business, right? You're worried about things like cash flow, paying bills, getting payroll paid, selling products to your customers, right? Those are your worries, right? The attention to details, like Chris was talking about. And when you're running a small business, that's what you're focused on. When you're working for a larger company, someone else is worrying about making payroll and paying the bills, right? Those are not your worries, right? You have less freedom, and you're not in control, but you're not worried about whether you have to make payroll. You're not worried about trying to find customers, unless it's your job to be in sales, right? But typically the worries are different. And the challenge is when you're an employee in a larger company, you have less freedom. You're not often able to make decisions about products or services or customers. There's sort of processes you have to follow. Oftentimes your voice is not heard, or at least you feel like your voice is not heard. Your opinion's not important. So I put these into two different piles, and different individuals deal with these things better than others, right? So figure out what works for you. Figure out the parameters that you're comfortable with. And I think that helps you decide whether you want to be an employee or whether you want to be an entrepreneur or a business founder or an enterprise founder. So I think it's always challenging in the beginning. And again, with Chris's business being in this subscription model, he has sort of this added pressure of how do I because he's actually financing his customers' purchases. and how do I do that? right? So there's these added cash flow challenges in a business like his, where he has to figure out how he's going to finance that stuff. And why Chris is successful and others, others don't make it, there's a whole plethora of reasons. Some of that is luck. Some of that is timing. It's being in the right place at the right time and just starting something that was meant to be successful at that moment in time. But it's always drive. It's always commitment. It's always attention to details. Those things are present and common in all successful businesses. They might not all be present and common in the individual entrepreneur, but they're present and common within the organization someplace. And if you're an entrepreneur, if there's a set of skills that you're lacking for success, well, you better figure out how to bring them into the business, right? With some other employees or partners, however you want to structure it. But all successful businesses have those key elements.
Yeah, great, Bela. And then you combine that with the fact that, and he got these kind of personal and managerial experiences in the military. And then in his work experience, he saw this IoT space as something that was growing and complicated and companies needed help with it, right? So we also, if we go back to our opportunity recognition kind of conversations that we've had over the years in this podcast, both things happen at once, right? He had these kind of personal characteristics and managerial skills that you talked about. And he also, on the other hand, saw a great opportunity to provide some services that were needed in the marketplace. So it was a great conversation. And then I think the thread that ties all that together is you could tell that this was a guy that was passionate and loved what he's doing, right? He loves being an entrepreneur. He said it's like the best thing ever. And it's scary. And he talked about that, which is great. But he talked about the benefits too. So this is a guy that clearly loves what he does. And I really appreciate how well that came through in the interview. You asked him great questions and it really came clear. So this was a great interview and I learned a lot, which, it makes my day when I can learn something really interesting from a half an hour interview with somebody that I never would have met on my own. So Bela, I think we should wrap it up. What do you think?
I agree. Yep. Let's wrap it up.
All right. So listeners, thanks as usual for joining us once again. And we hope that you found this episode interesting and thought-provoking. If you have questions about what we've discussed, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is bela.and.mike@gmail.com.
And Mike, I don't know if you heard it in the background, but there was a little bit of noise going on, and that's because the lawn is being mowed outside of our house. So if there was that noise that you can hear, I apologize for that, but that's what happened here today. So please do follow the podcast. If you haven't already, just hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting app. And until next time, signing off from upstate New York where the lawn's being mowed. See you soon, Mike.
But Bela, if the lawn's being mowed, that means it's warm and the sun's out after I think a long winter there in upstate New York, yeah?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Enjoy. That's it from over here in Münster, Germany. Auf Wiedersehen.